All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to Everything College Bowl podcast. Today, me and Nick here, we do our preview and prediction for the Bahamas Bowl between the Buffalo Bulls and the Liberty Flames. Going down in Nassau, Bahamas, 11 a.m. early kick on Saturday, January 4th. Buffalo 2.5-point favorites. 50.5 is the total. Getting things started with that Buffalo offense. Nick, there's obviously high intensity in Buffalo right now with Josh Allen and his high-flying Buffalo team. Which leads to this team being vastly underrated and not talked about at all in the city. But this is a team that looks pretty solid throughout the year, especially on offense. 29.1 points per game, led by a quarterback in C.J. Ogbonna, who has been very productive for them. 2,200 yards passing, another 300 plus on the ground, 19 touchdowns through the air, 8 rushing, and then he has 5 picks as well. This has been a very productive player, 2,500 plus total yards, approaching that 30 touchdown mark. Really like what the senior's been able to bring to the table as a bit of a dual threat player. Completion percentage isn't all that great, 57%. But this is a team that's been effective on both facets of the game. You have 2 receivers in Victor Snow and J.J. Jenkins, who have been really good. These guys hog the targets, combined 10 touchdowns. They both have 500 plus yards. I really like what they bring to the table here. These are some guys that, again, command a lot of targets, and they're very productive through the air, going up against a pass defense that was pretty good throughout the year. Only allowed 11 touchdowns, 201 yards per game. This is a Flames team that, saw some respectable passing attacks throughout the year. They played Western Kentucky, snagged 3 interceptions on those guys, have not allowed 300 yards in a game once this season. So it's going to be a competitive matchup for Liberty through the air. What do you make of that matchup, Nick, for the Flames?
It's an interesting matchup here. I like what this Buffalo offense can do. This is an offense that's scoring 29 points per game and has looked really good in their last 4 games, which they won all 4 of these games. They scored at least 37 points in them, including 2 40-plus performances and a 51-plus point performance and a 51-48 barn burner against Ball State, which they won in overtime. That was a really crazy good game. I think Ogbonna is a really good quarterback for this team. 57% comp rate, 2,200 yards passing, 19 touchdowns to 5 picks. Good enough for me. I think it's really solid numbers for what this guy can do. This kid's talented. This kid's solid in the pocket, comfortable and confident, playing really good football for this team, and a good leader, a guy that's been around the program for a little bit, also has 8 rushing touchdowns and 311 on the ground. So, solid in multiple facets here. This Buffalo offense has really good balance. They're about 190 yards per game through the air and about 165 yards per game on the ground. So solid balance there. Victor Snow, J.J. Jenkins, these guys are very solid players, get a lot of targets. Snow especially, a very underrated player to watch, 6'10 for him and 6 scores, about 50 yards per game, while Jenkins has 536 and 4 scores. Taj Johnson as well is not a bad number 3 with 2 touchdowns and 213 on some limited targets. They can run the ball effectively. They got a decent back in Al J. Henderson, that is, who's a really solid, nearly 1,000-yard rusher with Ogbonna running besides him. Really impressed with that offense. And this is a defense for Liberty that's played good football at times this season. They got a good tendency to get interceptions. Certainly late in the season, they've proven to get a couple more picks here and there. They're decent against the pass, giving about 200 yards per game and only giving up 1 passing touchdown per game. 150 yards per game, good on the ground as well. So this is a defense that's putting up solid numbers with some solid veteran leadership.
Al J. Henderson, their top running back, 959 and 8 touchdowns, certainly helps bring plenty of bounce to this offense, 164 yards per game. Going up against the defense that's been good against the run, about 150 yards per contest they're giving up. But they went on the road to UMass at some point in November, gave up 263 rushing and 4 scores. And they got gashed for almost 400 against Jacksonville State. That's really the only blemishes. Other than that, they've been pretty solid on the ground. I think Buffalo, though, they'll also be a competitive matchup for them, and they're not going to get completely stifled. Some of the top players for Liberty, T.J. Bush, 8.5 tackles for loss. Joseph Carter and Jamar Brown going to be their top linebackers. Again, this is a defense that's been playing pretty solid this year. But they have had some tough outings, but that's not been the theme for them. So I think Buffalo will do pretty good. Offensive line's pretty stout against a team that has only 19 sacks, so I don't think they're going to be able to generate much of a pass rush. So it's really going to be down to them slowing down the run and not giving up big plays through the air. Moving to the other side of the ball for Liberty, this is where things get really squirmish for the Flames. This is a team that, had been putting up 430 yards per contest, almost 31 points per game as well. But Cade Salter, of course, he's transferring out, so he's not going to be here. Ryan Berger will be getting the start at quarterback. Salter had a pretty bad season, quite frankly. Just wasn't that good. He, as a runner, wasn't as effective, and as a passer, he was just, awful. He ended up getting benched in that game against Sam Houston State in the season finale. A game they were favored in, and we both picked the Bearcats, Nick, because we thought the offense would struggle. We had 83 yards, completed 34%. and had 2 interceptions. This is still a big loss for them, but he is having a pretty bad year. In Ryan Berger, this guy, he's been around college football for a couple of years. He came into that game, with 0 for 2. Really wasn't any better for Liberty, and with his limited experience, it's certainly questionable what he might provide in this game. He does have some nice pass catchers, Treon Sibley, Elijah Canyon. Those guys are solid. His offensive line, though, is missing 3 starters, at least, right now. The left tackle, the right tackle, and the left guard are all in the portal, and it doesn't appear they're going to be playing, according to Jamie Chadwell. So it's going to be, a full-fledged rushing attack for Liberty. Nick Quentin Cooley's great, 1,200-plus yards, 13 touchdowns. And then Billy Lucas has 63 and 5 scores against a run defense for Buffalo that's been respectable. 145 yards per game allowed this year on average. A couple of 200-yard games early on in the season against tougher opponents. And this is a tougher opponent here, Nick. Do you think Liberty has enough to just dominate on the ground?
I don't know if Liberty does have enough to dominate on the ground. I've been disappointed with this offense. And, early in the year, a lot of people, including myself, picked Liberty to go to the college football playoff despite having a very weak schedule, to be the Group of 5 representative because of the 2 players, Salter and Cooley, that were going to lead the way on the ground. Both of them are going to be key pieces of the offense. They have 20 combined touchdowns between the 2 of them, but Salter's 579 and 7 scores. A bit disappointing for him. Did not have a great season in the passer, 56% comp rate, 15 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and below 1,900 yards passing. Salter's out. He goes to Colorado. Want to see what that looks like for him, certainly. Now you plug in Ryan Berger, who only has 7 attempts on the season. Is he going to be fine in this game? They certainly had a long time to prep for. This game not being played until January 4th, so there's certainly been a lot of time to prep and work and practice. Jamie Caldwell is a great coach. I certainly believe that he's able to coach this guy and work on him, but this is certainly a tough spot to be thrown into. Losing 3 key offensive line pieces as well as tough. Jordan White, the left guard, committed to Vanderbilt, while Xavier Gray, the right tackle, is committed to Northwestern, and Jordan Hall, the starting left tackle, is still in the portal looking for a new home at the end of this season. Cooley, it's going to be his show. He's going to run the ball a lot here. 1,200 yards on the ground, 6.1 yards per carry, 13 touchdowns, 114 yards per game. So still impressive numbers for him, but 205 attempts, and Cooley is a really talented back. Curious to see if he enters the portal or what his situation looks like next year. He might be out of eligibility as well. I can't remember off the top of my head. I think Sibley's a really good wide receiver for the team. 500 yards receiving, 19.2 yards to grab is certainly a good number. 2 touchdowns for about 50 yards per game, while some other pieces on the roster at wide receiver, Cannon and Mobley, are solid pieces, with them having a couple touchdown grabs for them. Reese Smith was involved in this offense early in the year and had 3 touchdowns. Wonder if he'll get some more targets this one, but I do expect him to run the ball a whole lot, let Cooley kind of go on the ground. Billy Lucas, the backup, has 63, 5.5 yards per carry, and 5 scores as well, so they're quite effective at running the ball on the ground, averaging about 5.6 yards per carry, which is not a bad number at all, and 2.5 touchdowns per game on the ground. They're going to try and attack this Buffalo defense that has some solid pieces at linebacker, some big leaders, some big game players. 2 linebackers with over 140 total tackles are pretty impressive stats.
Yeah, those are ridiculous numbers. I'll get to those in a second. The rest of the defensive numbers, 28 points per game, 100th almost in yards per game, isn't great, and they're 120th against the pass. Maybe the numbers are a little bit skewed because over the last 4 games, they had opponents playing from behind. They gave up 330 in 3 straight games, all of them that they won, where opponents were playing from behind. And then Kent State, they only had 100 in a blowout. They're not very good. Like you alluded to, these are ridiculous numbers by linebackers. Sean Dollick, 159 tackles, 16.5 TFL, 5.5 sacks, and 5 interceptions, including a pick 6. This guy's on something, dude. I mean, these are ridiculous numbers. All signs are pointing to everybody playing in this bowl game for Buffalo. 143 tackles and 14 TFLs for Red Murdoch. I mean, this is just absurd. These guys play incredibly tough. I'm shocked the defensive numbers aren't aren't better than they are. You also have 2 other guys in Deion Crawford and Kobe Stewart also have 12 plus TFL themselves. Lots of production here for this defense, Nick, and I think this is a good matchup against a watered-down offensive line and a team that has a quarterback who doesn't have much experience to his name. I think these guys are going to play with a lot of energy, and they should be in for a pretty stellar afternoon.
If you're a longtime viewer of this show, you know that I'm a big fan of these stat sheet stuffers, these guys that absolutely load up the stat sheet, get a bunch of stuff done with multiple different stat categories, and these 2 linebackers do that. Dollick, an All-American, just phenomenal. You read off his stats. 4 pass breakups as well, 177 return yards on those 5 picks, about 35 yards per interception, and a pick 6. Pretty impressive numbers, while Murdoch has solid numbers as well with 5 forced fumbles. Honestly, he should have been an All-American as well for my money. These are 2 incredible linebackers. They really coach coach these guys well. Some solid players in the secondary as well. Solomon Brown, Marquise Cooper have pretty good tackle numbers as well. On most teams, these guys potentially would be 1 and 2 on their teams, but Murdoch and Dulles just have so many tackles. Brown 62, Cooper 65, 6 pass breakups for Brown, 8 for Cooper. A really solid player. I know the stats are not great, but like you alluded to there, they play teams that are playing from behind a lot recently, so I think the pass defense stats are a little overinflated. I still think this is a unit with some solid players. Charles McCathers as well is a really solid piece with 4 pass breakups and a pick for him, so I think this is a unit that still has some ball hawking players. They like to get interceptions. They force turnovers. They're really good at that, and when you're playing against an inexperienced quarterback who has not played a whole lot of football, this could be a big opportunity for Buffalo to get a turnover or two.
We also have a great safety in Solomon Brown as well. Moving to the final thoughts and the prediction. I think there's great juice here on Buffalo. I think Liberty is certainly possible. They just totally dominate this game on the ground, and maybe that'll lead to it being closer score. I just don't think this team is very good. I think their defense has been good throughout the year. I just don't think they're going to be playing with that much energy. I think this is just a free trip to the Bahamas, Nick, quite frankly. Buffalo with no transfers, nobody opting out, including all those guys on defense. I think they're going to play with high energy. I think it's going to be an incredibly tough day for Ryan Berger, and I think this offense for Buffalo, they're going to move the ball quite well with some nice balance. I see a blowout here in the Bahamas. I know bowl season doesn't really work like that. You don't typically get too many blowouts. So Liberty probably will make it competitive. I just don't think they, give a damn, quite frankly. And I think there's too many deficiencies to deal with across this roster. While, again, Buffalo, full hands on deck for them. And I think this defense, they're going to play lights out. Some of those guys we alluded to with their crazy numbers, this is going to mean something to them. I think Buffalo, they just care 100% more than Liberty does. So I think it's going to be a pretty lopsided score. Hammer the Buffalo spread.
Yeah, I like Buffalo a lot in this game. This is a talented team that's playing really good football this year. I think they're really rallying around their first-year head coach in Pete Lembo. They won 8 games. That's a pretty impressive number after a disappointing 2023. No one's opting out. Everyone's playing. They seem to be committed, locked in. Big things are coming for Buffalo. I think this team's trending in the right direction in the MAC. I do think they're heading towards that level they were playing under Lance Leopold. They also previously won the Bahamas Bowl under Leopold in recent years. In 2019, they beat down Charlotte pretty big, a 31-9 win to kick off bowl season. I had Buffalo in that one, a good way to start off Bowl Mania. This game wraps up Bowl Mania towards the back end of the schedule. Another interesting fact about Liberty is that the 6th straight bowl game that they've played in since being at the FBS level. They were the 7th season, their first season as an FBS team. They barely missed a bowl game, going 6-6. But since that season, Hugh Freeze and Jamie Caldwell, they've made 6 straight bowl games. They won their first 3, lost their last 2. Although last year's loss in the Fiesta Bowl was kind of a bit of one where you expected it. That was a tough matchup. They did lose the Boca Raton Bowl in 2022. I think they're going to lose this one as well, make it 3 straight. I'm just not really buying into this Liberty team. Don't really know what quarterback's going to look like. I worry about what the offense will be able to do. Cooley's going to get a lot of runs, obviously, but these linebackers are really good against the run for Buffalo. They've got great tackle numbers, and they can force fumbles as well as interceptions. I expect Buffalo to get some major turnovers, flip the field a lot, put themselves in good position, and get the job done and win this game. I like this a lot for the Bulls. I think it's a good matchup and a good way to wrap up Bowl Mania with a pretty interesting game going on in the Bahamas.
That's going to be it for today's episode. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.